in first year, and that move also went horribly. But again, I just kept building upon the skills, and the society helped me so much, and I feel so much more comfortable in everything involved in Mooting now. It's really valuable skills that Mooting can build upon, as well as, you know, provide as completely new. It is really valuable. But yeah, that's my experience in Mooting, and I've grown to love it after initially not loving it too much.
Hi everyone, I don't know if you saw me in this morning's lecture. Yeah, we were just trying to like get as many people involved with this as possible, because it does benefit like law students so much. And as kind of Robin and Scarlett have said about public speaking, I'm sure no one came into Mooting like fully confident. I'd done public speaking before, but I'd never like mooted or done like mock court before. And it's not really like public speaking, because you're only going to be in front of like 5 other people. It's not that scary. It's going to be fine. So yeah, I mooted in my first year with someone I got paired up with. And then I did an external in first year, which went terribly. That was with Scarlett. Great memories. And then in second year, I actually chose my partner, who was not a law student, but she brought like so many other things to the table, so I could like focus on our legal research, and she could just bring those really strong arguments and excellent confidence. So yeah, and what else did I want to say? Yeah, and I'm just so excited to see everyone moot and build your skills, and yeah, it's going to be great.
Do you want me to introduce myself? I might as well, might I? So I'm Lewis. I'm the externals coordinator for the Mooting Society this year. Similar to all 3 of them before, I mooted in my first year. I hated it. I was so scared. But I think that's part of the actual process, to be honest. You start to relax a little bit during your speaking, and that doesn't really go away. Like last year, I competed externally. Probably the scariest experience I've had at university, to be honest, but it's a really important thing, especially if you want to be a lawyer later down the line, I think. So yeah, that's all I have to say really. You won't see too much of me as much as the others, but if you ever need any help from anyone, they're always willing to give it, so don't hesitate to message if you feel like you want some help.
I'm muted. Right, okay, thank you. I'm gonna now share my screen. I can see it. I'm gonna see if that works. If not, it doesn't matter. It's just mainly just headers as prompts with me and a nice little diagram from Kelsey. Right. Okay, that is actually that's not working, and I'm not going to stress about it, because I'm not amazing with computers. So the first thing I wanted to go over is, now we've done a little introduction, is the layout of the court. So we said that you're not going to be mooting in front of loads and loads of people. So when you moot in person, I know it's a little bit different if you're online, and we'll come to that. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But you'll have the judge and a clerk, and the role of the clerk is basically just timekeeping. When you're mooting pairs, so you'll either be a respondent or an appellant, and within each pair of mooters, there's a junior and a senior. So for the first round of internals, it slowly increases the time limits on how long you'll be speaking, but juniors will be speaking for roughly 5 minutes, and seniors will be speaking for roughly 7 minutes, I believe. Yeah, okay, that's right. And the clerk will be there to give you warnings of when your time's nearly up and when you need to stop talking. So really do keep an eye out. Don't stress about it massively. They're not going to cut in, yell at you. They'll just hold up a little sign, then you'll know how you're timekeeping. I will say it's very different when you practice your speech and you've written it all down and you've timed it. It's a little bit daunting to then go read it out, because you might be going a lot faster or a lot slower. So having the clerk then will help you with your pacing. That's something I know I struggle with quite a lot. I speak really, really fast, especially when I'm mooting. And looking at the clerk helps me slow that down a lot. Okay, so in terms of the order of speaking, the first person to go is the junior appellants. they speak for 5 minutes, introduce the court, introduce everyone who's sitting there and their colleagues, and then the next person, so they speak for 5 minutes. The next person who speaks is the junior respondent. The senior appellant goes next for 7 minutes, and then the senior respondent. So it's kind of like a bit of a zigzag. So what a big part of preparing your speech, and I'm going to go into preparing your speech and approaching the problems and a bit of court etiquette, but a big part of when you're presenting your legal argument in front of the court is the judicial intervention, and this is when the judge will interject whilst you're giving your submission and ask you a few questions. It might be a little bit confusing to do this in this order, but Scarlett, I know that you've got somewhere to dash off to not too long, so I'm going to ask Scarlett to speak a little bit about judicial intervention now quickly. Could I also ask, sorry, if your mic is on, just mute it, because it's the background noise. We've done it before. Just keep it on mute and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best idea. So I've obviously introduced myself. I'm Scarlett. I'm going to speak a little bit about what you can expect from the judge in general, but also what judicial intervention is and how that goes as far as the moot. So one of the committee will judge your moot for the internal competition. You can take a look at us now. We're not that scary. The judge, remember, is a human being. They will have heard the moot again and again for God knows how many times. So if you want to keep them engaged, make sure they're listening, make sure you're speaking well, speaking clearly. I know it can be hard when you're nervous, but also engaging with them, asking, Robin will speak about this later, but asking if they look like they're having trouble finding a reference that you cited, or if they look like they are writing something down, pausing for them, asking them if they would like some time to write down, or if they could see the case that you've cited, things like that. The judge is a person, and keeping them engaged is super important, and also will just, really emphasize the good parts of your submission. The judge, as far as addressing them, my lord, my lady, things like that, and keep your court etiquette when you're talking to the judge at all times. Don't let words like, if the judge asks you a question, which they will do, I'll come to that in a moment, don't let your court etiquette or your style of speaking slip because they've asked you a question. A moot, in theory, should be a conversation with a judge rather than a submission and a Q&A. It's a conversation about the point of law. Now, for the internals, it won't be as much of a conversation as maybe an external competition would be, but that doesn't change the principles of you are speaking and discussing a point of law in a formal courtroom setting. But the judge will ask you questions. There is no way of getting around that. And the judge should ask you questions about your argument, about what you've said. The judge will ask you questions about the cases you've used, about cases that may oppose that. The more questions you get asked, it tends to be the better you're doing. The judge is trying to press you. If you're doing well, they'll want to know more about your argument, know how in depth you know the cases. But like I say, it should be a conversation with the judge, and they will continually ask you questions. And if you're answering well, you'll get asked more. With that being said, they will eat into your time limit. So it might be best, if you're writing a submission, to be aware that the judge will ask you questions, and that will take time. Some very nice judges may let you run a little bit over time if they've been asking lots and lots of questions and you haven't had hardly a chance to finish your submission. But as far as the judge, I think the main thing to take away is remember that they are just a human being. They are just a person, and for internals, they'll be one of us. They will be, a student. So very much not scary. But remember as well that them being human being also means that they may lapse in concentration. You have to keep them engaged. And remember as well that we have all been in that position before, and we've all been terrified and more scared than you can imagine doing that before. And at the end of the day, well, I mean, what we tend to find is that people leave moots and go, oh, that wasn't that hard, was it? And they breathe a massive sigh of relief. But you can expect from the judge, like I say, is them being a person, and they will ask you questions about your argument. They'll ask about the cases you've used as well. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say on the judge and judicial intervention. Just be prepared for it, and if a judge does interrupt you, stop and listen to their question. Don't just plow on, just hear their question. And if the judge actually asks you a question that you'll come to, feel free to say, thank you for your question, my lord, my lady. But I will address this later in my submission. Would you like to hear the answer now or then? And then the judge will respond with whatever they would like to hear. But yeah, the long and short of it is they're not that scary, and they're, for the internal competition, they couldn't be less scary. But I think that's all I have to say on judicial intervention as a whole and the judge as a character in the moot.
Oh, right, Brill. Thanks, Scarlett. Yeah, no, exactly what Scarlett said. It is, I think, for the internals, I think the judges are Kelsey, Scarlett, myself. We're not scary people, I promise. We are very, very lovely people. We've been there before. And yeah, like, getting yourself outside your comfort zone, like, I can only commend you on doing stuff like that. And that, like, we do respect that. We're not awful people who are going to be really horrible about it. Okay. So I wanted to touch on briefly working with your partner to approach the problem. The key thing on this is being organised. Is you don't have a huge window of time for when the problem comes out when your first round is, but I promise it is doable. So the best way to approach it is it doesn't matter whether your moot partner is someone that you know really well or someone that Kelsey has paired you off with randomly. Both are absolutely fine, and they work different ways, work different for different people. I've had experience with both, like I said before, and there wasn't like a huge difference. The best way to go about it is get a meeting in place as soon as you get the question, try and arrange when you can go through it. A lot of the time, the content of the law surrounding the problem will surround something you've been studying in class. I know that, yeah, there are two of you on each side. There's two. So when you're in a partner, you're either both the appellants or both the respondents. You wouldn't be one junior and one senior of each. You're both on the same side. When you get the problem, and Kelsey will send you something with whether you're appellant or respondent, make sure that you know which side of the law you're arguing. And if you don't, drop Kelsey an email if you're really confused. I'm really sorry, or any of us, we'll all be familiar with the problem. Send us a message, send a message to the Instagram or an email to the law at Mooting. And just, it might sound like a stupid question, but you'd be surprised how many people show up and they've prepared the wrong side. And it's a really easy mistake to make, and you don't want to spend all that work doing it and it's not the right side. So coming to the library or wherever you want to have your meeting, and go through and start working on a skeleton, a very, very rough skeleton argument of what are the key points. And maybe I would focus on 3 key areas of what do you think is the crux of the issue and how you're going to devote your time to focusing on these things. You will not be able to focus on absolutely every single aspect of the problem in minute detail. And very often there will be a red herring or something that is just designed to throw you. So please do not get hung up on things that you feel that you don't have enough time, because I know it's only 5 minutes and 7 minutes. So if you feel that you have a point but it's very weak and you're not quite sure, spend more time. It's better to have 3 really well structured and really well argued points than have about 6 or 7 that are quite flimsy and you haven't had enough time to really focus on. So once you've got your 3 points, you can do this fast as I can, but I would split it up between the junior and the senior of who wants to research and argue which ones. There's some that you might want to focus on together and compile research on that together, but ultimately the senior respondent or appellant will be speaking for longer, so it might be better to give them 2 points and the junior 1 point. They could flesh out a lot bigger, so however you want to split it, just bear that in mind. And then when you're working on your problem, remember to use authority. So you want to be using legislation in cases. There is, Kelsey, I'm not quite sure how many it is for internals, but there's 5 authorities. Please don't go over that. Kelsey will cover that a little bit more in the bundle side to the training session. But when you're backing up every single point, you want to make sure that you've really looked at the case in a lot of detail. I know that if you're not a law student, that may seem really daunting, but I promise it won't. It's more so about the argument, the way you structure it, rather than the really core legal theory. So please don't worry about that. Please don't be deterred about that. If you need any help, again, send it to any of us are able to help you with that, build up help you, point you in the right direction, especially with your first moots. It won't be all cloak and dagger. You don't know where around it. You don't know where to start. It should hopefully be a little bit more straightforward in terms of what is the key issue of the problem. So please, if you're not studying law, do not be deterred by that. And maybe speak to your peers, or I don't know how you want to approach that. So yeah, divide up your issues really well and make sure you've got the appropriate cases to back that up with, as well as the legislation. A little bit of both, and using the same cases for different points can show really well integrated argument. I would just like to say a little bit, I'll bring it up later on, of when you need to submit your authorities. I'm actually going to hand over to Kelsey, if that's okay, because I think this is a really good time to talk about the
bundle.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can share screens.
Just while you're figuring out the tech, can I just, for those who maybe don't know, the appellant is the person who is arguing that the law has been applied incorrectly to the case, and the respondent is arguing that the law was in fact applied correctly, and it's on a point of law, not evidence, the moot. You're arguing whether the law has been applied correctly to the case or applied incorrectly to the case. I know that they're terms people might not be familiar with.
I've got an example moot problem here. Don't worry, we won't be using this one, but here you can kind of see the wording. So it says like the defenders deny liability, the defenders contended. So in that situation, all those would be on behalf of the respondents. So the appellants would be arguing basically the opposite issue. So in this particular case, they don't really give you appeal grounds, but don't worry, we'll be giving you appeal grounds. You'll have that kind of direction to follow. And obviously, if you aren't sure what it is, you can ask us, but I hope it will be fine. Okay, I have a PowerPoint. So I'm going to talk about the bundle. When I first mooted, we had a physical bundle, which is a folder filled with your authorities. I will probably be asking for digital bundles, which is like what I've made, and I just think they're easier than getting first-year students to print off a bunch of cases. So here we go. If you don't know what a bundle is the collection of cases and or legislation which you will be relying on in your moot. During your speech, the judge will have the bundle in front of them, and this is how you will take them through what you will be quoting, what your authorities are, and you will do this by highlighting and tabbing. It should also contain a skeleton argument at the beginning, and perhaps a contents page and the moot problem. We're not really going to ask for a skeleton argument for the first round. I will circulate one. If you want to make one, go ahead. If you aren't sure where they are, obviously look at the example one. It doesn't need to be in that much detail. It just basically shows the judge what points you're going to make and the order that you're going to make them and the authorities you'll be relying on. So it's a really good idea if you are using one to show the judge that you have made one, and that's what the points are.
We do like to have formal wear for the moots. Please do not stress massively about this if you haven't bought a 3-piece suit with you Sunday. It's not a problem. It does look slightly more professional if you're coming on dressed smartly. It doesn't have to be a suit. If you just dress smartly, that's a big part of court etiquette. We are pretending to be lawyers. We are presenting legal argument. It does make a good impression if we look the part as well. But don't stress massively over having a whole new wardrobe about it. But it is nice to see, especially mooting in person, which is very exciting because we haven't been able to meet in person. It is exciting. We're doing this for fun. We're not doing this against our will, and you will enjoy it. And it will help you get into the spirit of things, I think, as well, wearing a suit. So that's just a brief thing on that. We've spoken about referring to the judge. Most of the time, the judge will be Kelsey, Scarlett, or myself. In that case, it will be my lady or your ladyship. I make that mistake all the time. I do that a lot. But it's not my ladyship and it's not your lady. It's always my lady or your ladyship. So just bear that in mind when you are addressing the judge. I think it always makes a really good impression to be very courteous to your colleagues in the room with your introductions, like listening respectfully. Look as if you're taking notes while they're speaking. That comes, especially when you move externally and it is in person. If it looks like you are really engaging in what your colleagues are saying, specifically with, and this is a problem for later on, so we'll revisit this. But if you can refer to something and offer a quick rebuttal to something your colleagues across the table have mentioned in your speech, if you have a case already in your own speech and you can elaborate slightly on that, we'll come to that later. That's another way that it looks like you're engaging. But just for now, if it looks like you are actively listening, taking notes and focusing on what your colleagues are saying, especially if you're on Zoom, I know it's really easy to look very distracted, looking around the room, whatever. Don't do that. It's very obvious. It looks bad. What else for court etiquette? Oh, okay. Kelsey mentioned as well. A lot of the time you might see other meetings saying, do you have sight? Does my ladyship, your ladyship, does your ladyship have sight? Everyone has a different mooting style, and the more moots you do, the more you'll engage with your own personal mooting style. Do not feel the need to say that after every single time you refer the judge to a case or to a highlighted section. Always do highlight it, always try and make it clear to see, but immediately after referring the judge, don't then ask the question because they haven't found it. They don't have it. You don't have to say it at all, just give a little pause. Remember, we're not expecting you to speak on every single second. If someone asks you a question, if you're waiting for the judge to find the right to have of your bundle, have a breather, collect your thoughts, have a glass of water. That's all perfectly acceptable. And it makes your own speech, your own submission seem a lot more controlled. So that I personally feel that comes across very nicely. Instead of going 100 miles an hour, up to you. That I know that a lot of that will come with time. Is there anything else anyone wants to add for court etiquette? But just being really, really polite, and especially as Scarlett touched on really early on, when you are answering a question on judicial intervention, try really hard not to slip back into something that's a little bit more colloquial, a little bit more. It is a conversation with the judge, yes, but remember that they are the judge, and to be respectful. And then it's very easy to go in with notes, and I'll touch on this in a second, and to be reading off a long spiel, be asked a question, be really like knocked off, and then turn and have almost engage very, very differently, and then go back to like a pre-prepared speech. So try and keep it informed with the rest of your submission. When you have met with your partner, you've prepared a very rough skeleton argument. I know that you're not expected to, it's not mandatory to have a skeleton argument for the first round, but what I mean by a rough skeleton argument is an outline of the points you want to make, bearing in mind the grounds of appeal from the question, and who's going to address what, and then what you're going to address, and all your cases. So like a plan of your speech. You go back home, you prepare your speech, you time it, you write it out. It's very tempting for a lot of people to write out this speech, come to their moot, and read off the speech. I understand completely why you might want to do that, and it's something I have done in the past. The only issue you might find if you do go down that path is that when you are asked a question, it makes your submission slightly disjointed because suddenly you're thrown off course a little bit. You're knocked off like a rolling play-by-play of what you want to say. It's always better to have little note cards of the point that you're making, or a quotation from the highlighted part of your judgment or the legislation or whatever authority you're referring to. That's totally fine. No one's going to expect you to memorize what one judge said. We're not going to do that. But to prepare these on little cards and flick through them, it will also help you with your pace. If you're more controlled, if you know, oh, by the time I'm at this time that I've gone through my speech, I should be on this note card. It will help you a lot with control. It does not look bad at all if you're bringing in note cards or papers to your moot. it looks worse if you've brought nothing in and are just going off the top of your head. When the judge asks you a question, you may want to refer back to a previous card or piece of paper that you've referred to beforehand. Try and keep it neat so you're not faffing around, flipping through pages, panics. But you will have to refer back to previous bits in your speech, particularly if the judge didn't have a moment previously where they could ask a question. And that's another thing to note, that make sure when your speeches, you're not fighting for your life every single minute of your allocated time. You've got a point to make. The judge is interested in what you want to say, and they do want to ask you questions. So after you make what you feel is a pretty good point, it's pretty solid, pause, take a breather, maybe have a glass of a little sip of water, and that will give the judge a really nice amount of time to ask you a question, so that they don't immediately feel they've got to force their way in, or right at the end of your submission, they don't have to ask the question that you referred to 10 minutes ago, and then you've got to find it. Yes.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I personally was so prepared in my first one, and I wrote a speech. I think it's not bad, but the only thing is, if you are going to use a speech, after every paragraph or every point, do take a break. Just let the judge, and if they don't want to ask a question, they'll let you know. They'll nod for you to continue. So just to reiterate, exactly what Robin says, and you're not going to get it because it doesn't go in until you do your first moot, that it is a conversation, and that you, while you have a speech and you've done all this research and you just want to get your point across, the judge needs to understand you, and the judge wants to be engaged in what you're saying and probe you on cases and points that you've made, because it is interesting. So don't worry if you don't get it the first 2 times. We're here to help, and we're here to help you grow and become mooters. And yeah, so
I just very quickly, I need to shoot off in a moment, but thank you all for coming, and it's been lovely to see you all again. I just wanted to say briefly about the submission. Robin mentioned this, but make sure you're speaking clearly, and you're, like Kelsey said, you're taking a break after each point you've made, gauging what the judge is thinking. It is also sometimes quite helpful to outline the facts as the respondent or the appellant, whichever side you're on, sees them, as you wish to interpret them, to say early on how the law should be interpreted from the response or the appellate point of view, and structure your argument really well. Basic things, your point, your authority, what that means for the case, and make sure as well that you have a good conclusion at the end. And this can be really hard because there are things like running out of time. There's a clear thread throughout your argument, and then that comes to a nice conclusion. But I will have to shoot off and leave you with the rest of the committee. But lovely to see you all again, and thank you for the committee. You've been great.
Robin, do you want to take the question in the chat, because I think it's quite an important one?
If a judge asks you a question, can you discuss it with your teammate, or could you answer straight away? Yes, you can discuss it with your teammate. I would hesitate. It's not something you can't do. I wouldn't do it. Remember that to win a moot, you're not necessarily winning the argument on law, by who the best legal argument. Sometimes you'll get your moot problem, and if you're an appellate or respondent, you'll think, oh great, this is a lot harder to argue. Don't be disheartened by that. Sometimes that's better, because the judge will acknowledge that you have the harder argument to fight. Fight's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. You have the harder argument to prepare. That's not how you win a moot. You're winning it on how you present yourself and your submission. So if a judge has judicial intervention for you, and it's a really, really difficult question, and it just throws you, take a moment, gather your thoughts, think if you've got something in your notes that could help you, and then answer it the best way you can. In external moots, I don't know if you can discuss it with your partner.
I've not seen anyone do it, but you can ask the judge. And if you know that what the question is something that your partner is going to speak about, or that they know more about, you can always say to the judge, my lord, that is a very good question. However, my partner or my learned partner is going to cover this in her submission. If you would rather wait to hear a more in-depth answer, then that will be covered. However, I'm happy to do it now, or you know what I mean. So
yeah, That exactly. So there is the collaboration, and you can always do, as a core etiquette thing, do refer to them as like my learning colleague. It sounds very good, but yeah, you can discuss it, but don't. I really wouldn't. And you can ask the judge to repeat the question if you're unsure of it. You can ask, if you know, phrase it nicely, and you can ask the judge to repeat it and answer it as best as you can. They shouldn't be really, really tricky, very difficult to answer questions. It'll be something based on your submission and what you've prepared, so answer to the best of your ability. Lewis, you wanted to say something? Sorry.
No, yeah, you basically covered it. You know, if you are really struggling with the question, you can ask for it phrased a different way as well. Sometimes the way that it's phrased can completely stump you. A judge will ask it slightly differently and it comes straight to your mind. So judges have no problem with doing that either.
Yeah.
I think what you have to remember is, like, you know, we're not going to ask you really difficult questions, I promise. We'll kind of just probe you on a point or perhaps about a specific case, and you'll maximum only be asked about 2 or 3 questions, and it won't take that much of your time, hopefully.
I think in my first internal meet, I was asked I was the junior, but I was only asked 1, maybe 2 questions, and they were both something like, I was asked to give the citation of my case, because I think I was just, in the case of Donahue v. Stevenson, and I was, do you have the citation for that? So then I just read out the citation. That's a really easy way that they can trick you up. Also, do have the facts of the case. You might not have to give the facts of the case, and that will free you up some time. So what I do when I prepare my speech, because I always start with a prepared speech and then I chop it up into bits to use as cards, and then shorten it and then I'd highlight things in different colours, so that if I ask, would your ladyship care for facts of the case? If they say no, then I can skip to the end of my highlighted bit, and I don't have to be really stumped and like go through it. So yeah, that's something to say. That's all the slides I had. I wanted to go over court etiquette, the layout of the courts, bundles, judicial intervention, and how to start going about approaching the problem. Remember that the grounds of appeal are there to help you. So although you can have other points that are really interesting, try not to stray too far away from them. I know we're near the end of our allocated time. We did want to finish around 8. So just quickly, the sign up for internals is out. There is a deadline. I'm not quite sure what it is, but Kelsey will remind you. Please get involved. And if you hate it after this, you don't have to do it again. But there's something to be said for like really straying outside your comfort zones.
Okay, so yeah, I've just posted a bit in the chat about the first year rep that you can apply to be. They're just kind of a link between us and the first years, and you'll kind of get to work a bit more with the committee, see what we do, get behind all the events, and kind of encourage your friends and other first years to come along and really just, realize that this is a student-led society and we do care about your opinions and what you're going to say. So there's that. I'm not sure when the deadline is for the first year rep. I don't know, but
I don't know either.
No, but the sign up for the internals closes this Sunday. So if you've not signed up yet and you're not sure and we haven't managed to convince you, please drop us a message, because we think it's really worthwhile if you're a student. So there's that. Also, I just wanted to query, you guys can say no. I don't know if I can get like a poll. I was just going to ask, obviously, I'm going to be inundated with questions when the moot problem comes out from you lot being like, what does this mean? I don't know who my partner is, and everything. So would it be helpful for me to kind of do like a drop-in, like Teams thing after the moot problem's released, and you can kind of all come if you have the same questions? Or should I like circulate the questions on an email or something? You guys just let me know, because I want to help you as much as I can.
Please reply with your Dundee emails. It makes things a lot more straightforward and it's a little bit more professional. I think most things in the law school, if you're emailing any of your lecturers, it is better to do it with your Dundee email. And some things like voting in the EGMs and things like that, you can only do with a Dundee email. So yes, we better to do that. I saw a question earlier of how long should you, because we're gonna take some questions now. Sorry. How long should it take you to prepare for an internal moot? That really depends. Please, I know that you have got a load of work Don't leave it to the last minute, because you'll massively stress yourselves out and it'll be a horrible experience, and it is a manageable workload. I would maybe have 3 meetings with your partner. The first one where you can read the problem, decide what your points are. The second one, and then you go away and then maybe spend some time finding some authorities, researching the legal basis. Have another meeting about, oh, did we get the same people, blah, 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 blah. Do you agree with the same cases, anything interesting? Then I go back and highlight specific bits in the judgments, and then I go over a last minute. You could either read your speeches in front of each other, that one if you'd written them in time, or just a last minute run over of, okay, these are the arguments we want to make, these are all our authorities, these are citations, and then have a think about, oh, what will the other side, what could they possibly argue? And have we fit that into our speeches? And then I'd write the speeches, make note cards, practice it in front of the mirror, and then I'd go into the moot. So I'd have about 3 meetings, but there will be some work on highlighting judgments that you maybe wouldn't need to do together. Please be aware that your bundle is due 24 hours before your moots to be emailed in, and your authorities.
I'm not. Yeah, so please email me your bundle, or law-mooting@dundee.ac.uk, your bundle and your list of authorities 24 hours before your moot, and then you have to email your the opposing team, so either the appellants or respondents, and you can send them an unhighlighted bundle if you want to be really mean, so they don't know exactly what you're quoting, or if you just want to just email them the same bundle. That's up to you, but yeah, you do that 2 hours before. But I will include this in the email when I release the problem, so all that information will be written down and you'll have it, so that'll be fine.
But make sure you don't make your bundle last minute, because making a bundle last minute is a horrible, horrible, awful experience. I would not wish it on my worst enemy. Making that night before, no, it's bad. So any more questions coming in?
Everyone gets the same problem, and yeah, so either you can decide between you and your partner if one of them's going to make the bundle. I made, when me and Robin competed, I made the bundle because she doesn't know how to do it. So if you decide that's easier, or you kind of just send them bits of highlighted sections, as long as you all kind of both check it over, make sure that everything you're quoting from is going to be highlighted, then it'll be fine. But as I said, we're looking for very basic bundles.
It's definitely a big advantage to know what your partner, you're not expected to be able to argue their submission on their behalf, but it does help you so much if you understand the argument that they're going to be making, and if you know what they'll be referring to in their cases. So collaboration is really great. The worst moots are when the partners did not work very well together and prepared very different and not very coherent submissions. That Kelsey and I knew exactly what we were talking about. So if I was asked a question that I knew Kelsey in about 2 minutes was about to refer to, I would tell the judge, oh, this is going to be gone into more detail. And that looks, even though I didn't answer the question, that does look good, because it shows that I have an understanding. And I said, oh, I can briefly summarize, but my learning colleague is about to go into more depth than that in her submission. That looks amazing. The judge is not going to ask you to summarize. The judge will never ask you to do loads on the submission that your partner's about to address if you just said they're about to address it. You save yourself a lot of time. Is there any other questions? I also wouldn't do the bundle together. I would make sure that whoever's doing the bundle has enough time to make it, because you've sent over the highlighted pieces of your judgments and the correct pages with enough time for them. Don't be that person that gives in to them an hour before. But if you're both working on the same document, it might be difficult unless you literally sit at the computer together and do it. It's a bit fiddly.
Are there any more questions?
We will have a drop in. You can DM us, you can send us emails. This feels like you've just been inundated with a load of information, but at least now I always say to people, like, yes, it's a lot of information, but at least now if you know what questions to ask, whereas before you might have been completely lost when you would now start to ask a question because it was all just a bit of a nightmare. So if this does leave with lots of questions, that's not a problem. You still got some time before the deadline is to apply, and also for the drop-in. Just really ever think about it, and don't worry about being absolutely perfect for your first meet. It's not going to happen, and that's okay.
So a bundle hard copy, you don't need to have one. If you're not comfortable making a digital one, feel free to bring a paper one if it's easier for you, but it's not needed. The training set, or the recording should hopefully be in the chat when we're done. And when is the first moot? The moots will be beginning of the week of the 25th of October until the end of that week. Yeah, Ria, basically everyone that said either to an online moot is hopefully going to be put in a face-to-face moot, an in-person moot. I just wanted to make sure that no one was unhappy if there was an odd number of people for the online and I had to give someone an online moot. So don't worry, they're currently, as it stands, all going to be in person except those who only specified online. I'll put it in the chat.
The timetable for the moots will be released once the problem is released, so don't worry too much about that. It's all to come. I also just want to say that a lot of this information about how to approach a problem will only click once you've done your first moot, and then you'll be able to reflect on your first moot and be like, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing now. Is it true that in this first moot everyone goes to the next round? Everyone goes to the next round. So try your absolute best, but it is not the end of the world. You're not knocked out of the competition based on the first moot.
OMG, I forgot the most important thing. Please try your hardest not to say I think, I submit, I believe in the moot. It's a really big no-no. You have to say it is submitted, the appellate submit.
They don't care what you think. That sounds harsh. I care what you think. I do not.
A lot of people write down in their submission like it perfectly, and if you read it off then that's fine, but it tends to be if the judge asks you a question you'll start slipping into the I think, I believe. So please try not to do that, but again, your first years, we know it's difficult and we all do it.
Particularly with your judicial intervention, that's when you would need to watch that. We will be giving you an example bundle you've seen, and you've got that little video of how to make it, and we'll go into that in more detail later on. And you will be given an example submission of how to structure a speech. So really refer to that when you have your meetings with your mooting partner, just refer to that. But I would say the first most important thing to do is hammer down what are your key points, aim for 3 good points, and then try and bulk them up with your citations, with your legislation, with your cases. But your first meeting is really important. Say, these are the appeal grounds. Are we appellants or respondents? How are we going to respond to this problem? What's the key issues? And then start dividing them up, finding citations. How long do moots usually last? Oh, it depends if we run over.
I'm hoping to the junior gets 5 minutes and the senior gets 7 minutes. So in total, that is, how long is that? Is that 24 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
24 minutes.
Yeah, 24 minutes. So in theory, it's never going to be 24 minutes. It'll be about 30. But I'm not really going to let you run over time. If you're at 5 minutes and you're not done, you can briefly conclude, and that's it. Yeah. I'm afraid.
We'll usually give you they won't let you finish your submission usually, but they would let you briefly wrap up. So make sure that even if you don't get to your conclusion, you've got a short little conclusion of let's just wrap this up. If they do say briefly conclude, please do briefly conclude. Do not just continue with your submission, as tempting as that might be. And Kelsey, are you planning on giving people individual feedback via email or in person at the end of the moot?
Probably over email, if that's easier to try and get some really good constructive ones. I've got some marking schemes that we'll talk about in the meeting. But that should be it. What else do I have to say? Yeah, I'm currently putting together the timetable. If I do accidentally give you a moot during a tutorial and you really want to attend the tutorial or you can't change it, please let me know, and I will change. Please let me know as soon as possible. But if I put you in a lecture and you don't really care if you miss the lecture because they're recorded, then feel free to just come along, because it is harder to rearrange. But I will try my hardest. So please do let me know if you can't make your moot time, or you want to reschedule for whatever reason, as soon as possible.
Yeah. Warnings in advance, just communication. Kelsey's doing an absolutely fantastic job, but it is a stressful job. So if there are any sort of changes, please let her know beforehand. And she will try her best to make it work, and we will try our best to support her. But she's also not a miracle worker. She can't, at the very, very last minute, make things happen the way that you would want them to all the time. And that is unfortunate, but She's only human. So she's doing an amazing job. Just let her know beforehand if anything changes. That's not a problem. It's only a problem if you don't let us know. When's the deadline for signing up to the Moot Sunday evening? So yeah, I feel like we're not really getting other. Yes, there are moots outside the internals competition. Those are external moots where we meet against other universities. Some of them are coming up very quickly, and a lot of them won't be open to first year students. Depending on what level you are, if you're an English law student and you're in first year, you're technically level 2 students. We're currently deciding how we're going to open them up, because a lot of the external competitions we pay to enter. Not all of them, but a lot of them would require people who have previous mooting experience. It'd be really difficult to enter them never having done a moot before or not having a lot of formal moot practice. But when we get to auditioning, which should be before Christmas, we'll work out how, and you would have auditioned for them then we will let you know how you can sign up for those. But there will be an audition process for that, just because of the amount of interest that they garner. We'll hold an audition, we'll have a mooting practice, and then we'll decide who makes it onto the team. I won't say too much about that because I know that is Lewis's jurisdiction. But yes, even if you don't compete in them, there are still ways to get involved in the whole day, particularly with the Lord Jones if you're not a mooter, which I know Kelsey's had experience in. So don't be too disheartened. We can yeah, and the problem is the same. Sorry, I'm just quickly saying that. For second year, if you're in the internals competition, every round is the same problem for everyone competing.
Yeah, if you're a second year or a third year or fourth year, I probably will be judging you a bit harsher, because the first problem, it's always like the same problem every year. So you'll have done it 2 or 3 times now. I'm expecting it to be perfect. But yeah, if you're really keen on externals, you can tell me during your moot and I can give you like a bit more feedback, because really the only way to get better at mooting is to just keep doing moots. About last year, I think I did like 25 moots. That's including like mock moots for my externals. So if you want to do one of those like in between the internals rounds, then feel free to just talk to me and say, listen, how was this? And I'll try and help as much as I can. But it is just getting used to it and being in that weird situation, because you won't have done it yet. But in 2 weeks, you'll be like, oh, that's what they were talking about.
And we've got some recordings of moots that we've done. We're going to see if we've got any that are suitable to share. For they will unfortunately be online moots, but a recording of that to see how we do that. So that should hopefully be available. And also you can sign up for internals through the link in our Instagram. We've got Linktree in our bio. Sign up through that. Please use your Dundee email just for all communications with us. It'll just be a bit easier. It'll also be easier for us to find you using your Dundee email than just a very generic random Gmail or something. It's just a lot easier for us. But if there's no more questions, then we might wrap this up. And bearing in mind there is a drop-in that we'll both be attending, and we'll see new moots. And we are always available for not a general chat, but a recent conversation through DM or email, or if you just see us wandering about campus, don't be afraid to just pull us for a chat. We're perfectly happy to do that. We're very approachable, lovely people. So don't worry about that. But take it from us, Kelsey and I have mooted together and we did very well. So we are here to depart our advice and give you some wisdom and any help that we have. So I think we'll wrap up now, because I know lots of you've been on the Dulls event, so I don't want to take up your whole evening. But thank you for coming. And we're going to try and get a drop-in and stuff like that sorted in due course.